We've joined now from the Brookings Institution by Michael O'Hanlon, a senior fellow on foreign policy over at Brookings. And Michael, anticipated address tomorrow night. What's the critical thing that President Obama, what's the piece of the argument that has to be in there to your mind?
Well, good to be with you guys. And I think that the key thing is to give some sense of why this may work. After all, we've had a year that's been dominated by adding 30,000 U.S. troops previously, and yet the commander in the field saying that things were continuing to deteriorate, and many people now likening Afghanistan more and more to a quagmire. So I think enough of the basic ideas are out there about what the president's likely to say, that there won't be too many surprises about troop increases, about the hope for more allied contributions, about some notional but not firm exit strategy. All that stuff, we sort of know in advance, unless it's been misreported or misleaked. And so I think the greater issue here is the overall sense of confidence the president has about how this can work in the face of Afghan government corruption and all the other problems we've been hearing about. I believe there is a way to make that case, but that's going to be the more challenging part.
How many audiences is the president speaking to tomorrow night?
Two. Well, I suppose there are sub-audiences within each, but United States and Afghanistan. And in the United States, he's, of course, trying to show resolve, but also a limit to his patience. And to some extent, that's the same thing he's doing in Afghanistan, trying to show, and also I should say, you're right to raise the notion of multiple audiences, because I forgot one. Pakistan is crucial. He also has to tell the Pakistanis that we are serious about this, that we are committed for the longer term, so they won't sort of keep the Taliban on a slow burn, on the back burner, waiting to bring it back if and when they think that we're on the way out. And so, yes, there are three key audiences: the American public / Congress, the Afghan government, and the Pakistani government.
Michael, there was a story in the Wall Street Journal today that talked about how the strategy that's emerging from President Obama is a bit different than McChrystal talked about, because it de-emphasizes Afghan security forces. How critical is that as a distinction in making the case to Congress as well as the larger strategic mission?
That's a good question, and I was intrigued by that article. I don't yet know what I think the real answer is. I'll be interested to see what the president says by way of clarification tomorrow. It may be that President Obama is just going to say, listen, let's get up to those intermediate goals, which are going to take us another year anyway, and then we'll reassess at that point. And let's also try to use some informal security structures, somewhat akin to the Anbar Awakening militia groups from Iraq, but in a more structured way, government-supervised way in Afghanistan, instead of hiring these people all formally into the police and the army. And keep an eye on how fast we can grow these institutions while reducing the corruption. So I think all these are key questions. My guess is that he hasn't ruled out the possibility of a larger Afghan army or police, but that he wants to keep that as a future decision.
Well, so then is this more of when they stand up, we'll stand down?
Well, yes, that has to be the essence of the strategy, because the way in which this works well enough to achieve our core goals, basically of keeping al-Qaeda and the Taliban out of Afghanistan, the way it works is for us to hand off to the Afghan security forces and to some extent to the judiciary and the justice system. Obviously, over the long term, you'd like to see Afghanistan develop more economically, have alternatives to opium, reduce corruption in the government, all those sorts of things, but they are less crucial to our exit strategy than the capabilities of those security forces. And I think that's the part that needs to be emphasized first and foremost, so we don't get lost in a cacophony of just all these demands, all these goals, all these incredible challenges, and people just throw up their arms in frustration knowing that Afghanistan's a poor country that can't possibly attain all those things in the next 2 or 3 years. So he's got to keep a focus, I believe, primarily on the security forces.
Michael, how much of this strategy, or where does this strategy say to you Obama as opposed to Bush? Or is this very much like something we would have seen if under a third term of President Bush?
That's a good question, and I think there's every possibility that President Bush would have gone largely in this direction. And certainly Gates and Petraeus are two of the key architects, and of course they were there under Bush as well. But I think that President Obama deserves a lot of credit, frankly, for taking some time on this, for trying to figure out ways to send a message to Karzai that's a bit nuanced about our willingness to stay with him if he doesn't clean up his act, about this civilian surge. And despite what I just said about the Army and police being crucial, the civilian institutions in Afghanistan are important, and Obama has spent a lot of time on that level of detail. So I give him credit for really getting into some of the more nuanced and detailed areas here. I think the overall deliberation process has been pretty impressive.
And what do you think, very quickly in our last 20 seconds, the most salient point to make to the American public of why this is necessary?
Well, the most important is because, of course, al-Qaeda likes Afghanistan as its sanctuary. That's where it began to plan the 9/11 attacks. That's where it would love to return. That's where it's the most comfortable. It would be a huge symbolic impact on our war on terrorism and al-Qaeda's ability to respond and return. And, of course, Pakistan could be more threatened.
Michael O'Hanlon of Brookings, thanks a lot for being here.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, Michael.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Rick.
That's a tricky thing because that gets also into the Bush realm of really scaring the public into its necessity.
My pleasure.
Exactly.
That does it for this edition of Top Line. Be sure to click us on again tomorrow.
And it's twitter.com/thenote to keep that conversation going. And what a week.